How did I take feedback at 24 years old? Not very well. It was like somebody punched me in the face or the gut every time they gave me real feedback. I had not been coached. Even though I had great mentorship at that point, I don't know that I had been coached well in how to accept feedback and how to seek feedback. And it took a lot longer in my career before I got to the point where I think I was, even, that resistance to be defensive whenever that feedback starts to happen is something that's a learned behavior for me.
Yeah.
It's a bit generational also. And so that's been a challenge as I've moved throughout. And I wasn't good at it then. I didn't want to hear people's feedback. I just wanted to argue with them.
Right.
And so when you hear feedback from somebody you know personally, it's even harder, probably even a little easier to get defensive. And I think we fight that today in our worlds as you get to build relationships with your peer and your network group. Sometimes the hardest feedback is from the people that you trust the most, and it's also the most meaningful almost every time.
Welcome back yet again, Strong Conversations. I am still Sam Marcoux. He is still Jason Blair. This is part 2 of what we think is going to be a 2-part episode arc.
But maybe we'll make 3 or 4. Let's just see how it goes.
It might be 3 or 4. We're in your apartment. I feel pretty comfortable.
I've got plenty of time. We can make this happen.
We could just do, like you were saying, we could have a whole Netflix special. Just have an 8-part series.
I like it.
Just have cliffhangers all the way through. Like, no one will talk about White Lotus once we release these.
True. I agree. I haven't watched the last episode yet, so don't ruin it.
Oh, it's amazing when the aliens come down and
nice. Very.
No. So we left part 1 of your journey here. We were talking about your first time, maybe not your first time managing a team, but your first time being a manager of such a large team. You were a branch manager at 24 years old, and you were responsible for roughly 180 folks that were reporting in some way or fashion to you, correct?
Yeah, it's very interesting thinking back. Now, that day there were a lot of those folks were part-time because of the nature of the business that we were running, being heavy retail. But it was interesting times. And a lot of those people were people I was peers with along my journey, because it was only a 5 or 6 year journey, really, I guess, at that point that I came into that leadership role.
So when you came into that leadership role, you'd mentioned something to me off air that you had, I'm paraphrasing here, but you've done everything in that lumber retail space except drive the truck. So you've had a lot of different roles along the way.
I have.
Was that true at 24 when you took on this particular job?
It was. It was like, so at Payless, that culture, you could move around a lot. And so I had moved out to the sales floor to work in the paint department. Then I moved to the lumber counter. Then I moved out to, that was a prototype location. So I moved out to the lumberyard because they did this fancy cash registers in the yard, out in the lumberyard deal, and ended up working out in the yard for a long time. One of my favorite stories is that location sold 80,000 bags a year of 80-pound concrete. And so as a college kid at 21 years old, you can imagine I was having fun the night before. You go to the concrete area on Saturday morning and you were cured of your ailments pretty quickly because you would load a few hundred bags of concrete in the first couple hours. So it was a great lesson, a bit of that we talked earlier, lessons learned of you get out what you put in. And so each one of those steps along the way, I really talk about, I was never a driver, but in all those other roles, maybe later more of the contractor focus after my Payless days over at Fox or Galbraith, but it was a great journey.
So you had mentioned at the end of our first episode that some of the folks that you were managing as branch manager at 24 had some feedback for you. And you had mentioned something which I didn't know. Some of them were people that you grew up with. They were high school friends. I would imagine feedback you're getting from folks that you grew up with versus people that maybe you met in that professional environment is going to come at you a completely different way. But you'd mentioned that they had maybe critiqued a little bit about your, as you said, your green management style.
Yeah.
Talk me through that. What
I even think about like the thought of what you made me think of was, how did I take feedback at 24 years old? Not very well. It was like somebody punched me in the face or the gut every time they gave me real feedback. I had not been coached. Even though I had great mentorship at that point, I don't know that I had been coached well in how to accept feedback and how to seek feedback. And it took a lot longer in my career before I got to the point where I think I think even, that resistance to be defensive whenever that feedback starts to happen is something that's a learned behavior for me.
Yeah.
It's a bit generational also. And so that's been a challenge as I've moved throughout, and I wasn't good at it then. I didn't want to hear people's feedback. I just wanted to argue with them.
Right.
And so when you hear feedback from somebody you know personally, it's even harder, probably even a little easier to get defensive. And I think we fight that today in our worlds as you get to build relationships with your peer and your network group. Sometimes the hardest feedback is from the people that you trust the most, and it's also the most meaningful almost every time.
Now, I mentioned in the first episode, Jason, that you presented to a few folks from Simpson Strong Tie about a year ago. That's where I got to know you.
Yep.
And that topic was centered around feedback, and not just how to take that feedback, but actively seeking it out and knowing what to do with it. And I think those are tools that, like you said, learned behavior, not everyone has. So at 24, you're getting this feedback, or at any point up until maybe now, you said we have a propensity to be defensive, and you wanted to argue with people. Was that how you would push back when you got feedback? Were you trying to justify whatever actions you had taken to receive that feedback?
For sure. I believe so. If you think about the feedback was a component of what I talked about. Really, the basis of the whole discussion is around a culture of accountability, and the feedback part that we naturally, it's that fight or flight mode. So as people give us feedback, if the defense, I like to say, as the defense attorney starts to build the case as the feedback is coming your way, you're no longer listening to the feedback, you're building your case to the first few words and the assumption of what the rest mean. And really it's the part where I learned that when I get feedback, if in my mind all I have to do is say thank you for the feedback at the end of the conversation, is a very powerful change in the chemicals in your brain. And you listen to the people's feedback, you're no longer threatened by it. You can say thank you for the feedback at the end. You have the right to either agree or disagree, but you don't have to tell them which of those two things it is. And you walk away, and I think as you've experienced, I've talked a bit about how you've changed a bit based on that lessons that we talked about. I think we've talked about a couple of more times since then I would hope that what's happened with you is that you listen to feedback differently, that you don't judge it right away, that you're able to listen to it, to think about it, to ruminate on it a little bit, and then the outbound of that is that there's something great in every feedback. Feedback is gold.
Right.
It's absolute. Somebody's just handing you a gold bar, saying, "Here, this is what I heard. This is what I believe," and you can learn from that and whether it's changing a process or a procedure or changing the way you articulate something or the way you made somebody feel, it's all really important.
And that was the part that really sunk in for me, was thank you for the feedback. Because I'm a lot like you, and I think probably a lot of case studies out there, people start to give you feedback, even if you've asked for it. You want to defend your actions and your decision making and everything else. And you're right. As soon as you start doing that, you're no longer listening to whatever that feedback loop is. You are building a case, and you are shutting yourself off from potential growth, whatever that growth is. There might be something they're saying that you go, you know what, I do agree with that, and I can learn from that. So for me, it was a lesson in discipline to be able to say, I'm going to listen with intention and say thank you for the feedback, and exactly that, walk away. I can always revisit it later after I've thought about it, after I've changed things. I can ask for clarification later. At least that's how I took it. But in that moment, and the thing is, people feel powerless, in my opinion, because they're getting that feedback, whether they ask for it or not. But the power of being able to say, okay, I've heard you, and I am now taking all that and absorbing it and doing what I need to later. That's pretty powerful.
It is, and then think about the way that as you've changed people's mindset about your willingness to listen to feedback, it starts to change the way that they present the feedback to you, whether they're following the feedback tool that's built into what I taught or not. It starts to change how people see you, and you become more genuine. You become open. You listen. And it's just a great cyclical piece. It's accountable people seek feedback, and that creates more accountable people. It's a great circle.
Yeah, it really is. So the circle is there. We're talking linear right now. 24 years old. How long were you that branch manager? How long did you have that role?
Probably a year-ish.
Okay.
I ended up leaving. Payless went through bankruptcy, and I had an opportunity to change careers at that point. So I left and went to Foxford Galbraith, back in a manager and training role, to learn a more pro-oriented business segment. But it wasn't a really long time, but it was a very action-filled period of time.
When you make that change from branch manager, obviously the business changes in that regard, and you have to go do something else. What did it feel like a step back for you? Were you excited to have the job and grow with this new company, or take me through that transition?
Yeah, I'm not sure what my mindset was, and I think that I was excited to go where I felt like somebody wanted me to be a part of their team. And it's not that I didn't feel that way at Payless, but Payless was crumbling at that point. And so I was looking forward to that next step, and could I get into that process before that world became clogged with, at the time, a couple hundred other folks in the industry that eventually did all lose, that company's gone. So I don't know I don't remember. I was pretty young. I don't remember the exact feelings. I going to become a manager in training, maybe probably felt a little funny, but I knew that was a temporary assignment in the way that they did that. I had looked at a few other opportunities, and this one felt like the right thing, and I think a little more training in the realm of what their expectations were was really good for me.
So what did you learn in that manager and training role? We're talking lessons learned and things that you've carried with you. What was the big takeaway?
The big takeaway for me when I worked at Foxworth Galbraith was the heavy accounting portion that existed in the branches at the time was more than I had experienced at Payless. So this idea of managing GL entries and credits and debits and applying payments and all the things that came along with the control at the branch level at that company was different in a different way. I don't know if it was good or bad, but it definitely was different. That was the big part, was that. And then I worked with great operators there, and the speed and the functionality they had at just managing through a business that was primarily delivered were really good lessons learned of how to manage paperwork flow and process flow and manage vehicles in and out, and how to make sure loads are built properly and checked out, and all the really important steps that you could either create a process or you could learn from somebody who has pretty dialed in process. And I fortunately worked with some really good people that were good at it.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 7 years.
So when you go back to school to get your MBA, this is where you're working?
I was there, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Do you think that accounting aspect of it, because I've talked to a lot of leaders who, some have even said, just take a finance class. Like if you do nothing else, take a finance class that'll help you in life. Which I thought was pretty profound. I haven't done it yet, but I will. It's on my list of things to do.
It's never too late.
But did you find that being exposed to that environment, a different accounting type of environment, did that help inspire you to go, you know what, I got to go back to school and learn some more stuff? Yeah,
I think I was at that point in my life where I thought, well, I'm fully invested in this industry. I was probably in my 28, 29-year-old range at that point, and I felt like if I wanted to be successful in this industry at the time, it would have been successful at Foxford Galbraith. What is it that I can do to help set myself apart from the rest long term? Probably didn't think about it long-term thoughts at that time, but thought, I have an engineering degree. You're right, I have this gap. I've never taken a finance class. Somebody had to teach me what credits and debits were when I went to work for Foxford Galbraith. Even though I have math all the way up through differential equations, you still don't do any of that kind of thing in that realm. And so the basis of all those, the marketing class, the finance class, the ethics class, the HR classes, the legal stuff, all those components of that were needed, because I just had that gap in my education. I didn't have a business degree.
See, I'm never going to get in a debate with you, because you have that engineering degree. You've got the business side of it. You're super hardcore about sports, so I know you can hold your own there too. I don't know where the weakness is. I don't know that I'm fighting on it.
It's out there. It's out there for sure.
Maybe music. I know that. I know you're a country
for
fan.
Sure. I am, but I'm not great at music, so I would fail miserably in that realm.
Maybe but I mean, even then we were talking. About ChatGPT and ways to work around that. So I think you got me linked there too. But all right. So what was your next stop on that journey of your journey?
So after Foxworth, Galbraith, and then the wonderful Great Recession that we all went through,
Right.
I was in Western Colorado, and that was one of the markets that just shut off like a light switch. And I was fortunate enough to find an opportunity to move to Texas and go to work at Higginbotham Brothers as a regional manager for them. Is where I started my career there, managing. The first time I had managed multiple branches, so I managed 15-ish branches during my journey there. And yeah, it was great. It was a different world for sure, because it was more heavily, very small town hardware store with a lumberyard attached. A very different,
Okay.
a bit like what we do here at Tal, but on a smaller scale for the most part. And it was great. Big geography. I drove a lot of miles every day back in that time period, and so had an opportunity to work with some great folks there, and move through. My career, left there as director of operations, and then had that opportunity, the tail of that, to move on to True Value. So it was a hard decision to leave there. Texas was important, and we continued to live in Texas for a long time. I felt like I was going to get really impatient in that current role and was looking for an expanded role, and so that worked itself out by moving over to True Value.
You said that you'd mentioned that was your first experience in managing multiple locations. You said 15 total?
15 total. Yep. So I'm going to preemptively ask myself, what lessons did I learn? Because I have an important one I'd like to share with that. It was the first time in my career that I had really led leaders in a larger way. And that is a step in your career that is challenging, mentally challenging. As a leader, so much of what coming up in this industry, so much of what you're rewarded for is individual contribution. And when you suddenly shift to leading leaders, the endorphins no longer get to hit from individual contribution. So you have to grow through that. And that's another one of those phases in my career where it was hard for me. It took me a long time, well into my True Value career, and when I was fortunate enough to get some additional coaching on that, to really break through that part of it. Still a struggle I have to this day is staying out of the individual contribution, and my team would probably poke fun of me a little bit that sometimes I'll get way down in the weeds, and they'll remind me, they're good about it, say, hey, that's, you need to get out of that. But I vividly remember I was sitting in front of a store, and so out of the gate, I attempted to manage all those leaders the same way. Same expectations. I'm going to engage and interact with them in the same way. I'm going to follow up my notes in the same way. Like, it's like peanut butter. Everybody's the same.
Yeah.
And I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I could see where we could go, trying to get them to do things that they had not been coached on before, to change expectations, to change the retail execution, the cleanliness of facilities. And it was a battle. And I was sitting in front of a location, and I was really frustrated. And I went in and engaged with that leader. And I engaged with him very differently than I had ever before. And it worked. And so I remember I left that location and went to another location, and I sat in the parking lot and I took a deep breath and I thought, what is the best way to engage this leader today? And it was somebody who I had really butted heads with. So I went in and I engaged him very differently. And then it was like the light went off, like somebody smacked me in the head and was like, well, clearly you've been doing this catastrophically wrong. You need to, as you lead leaders, you need to think about how do you as a leader morph your style to be the right style for the person that you're managing. I think that's something that carries throughout. I think it becomes magnified when you're leading leaders, that you need to nurture their leadership skill set in the most effective way. And if there's somebody that needs to be held strictly accountable and have a detailed list, and then that's the way you need to do it. If it's somebody that you can tell them 80% of what you want, then they're going to figure out the other 20 because they're just really good at whatever it is you're asking them to do, then you need to nurture them that way. But you can either underwhelm or overwhelm somebody very easily if you don't think about how you do that. And I still think to this day, when I think about my career at Higginbotham's, that was probably the biggest takeaway for me was that piece.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because as you were talking, I was listening, but I had some random synapses firing from my own personal experiences. One, a good friend of mine still works for Simpson. His name's Mike Wright. Shout out to Mike. He's very good at hiring new folks into our organization. And he does a very good job, especially if they're new into the industry, of coaching them and nurturing them and getting them to be fantastic individual contributors. I am very good at poaching those people off of his team and bringing them to my team. So he likes to say, because he's an Sacramento, Las Vegas A's fan, he is the A's and I am the Los Angeles Dodgers, which I take as a compliment because
I could see that.
I'm a Dodgers fan, as is Rick from Go West. And I look at it, I know it was supposed to be a negative, but I looked at it as like, dude, you develop these amazing folks. And then they essentially come to my team because I can see the talent there, and we can just take it to the next level again as an individual contributor, but kind of that next level. What I noticed is as I started managing managers or leading leaders, as you said, some of the folks would start to mimic my day-to-day managerial style, and it didn't fit them. I think they were looking at me going, well, he's having success doing it this way, so I should do it this way. And it's not natural for them. It's not where their strengths were. And I struggled with how to get them to maybe take and strip down the sizzle and just focus on the steak, if you will.
Yeah.
How did you?
Well, I think it's a challenge in this industry in general. You have I think we're overrun by type A personalities, or that can be the risk in the LBM space in general. And it comes back to that thought, like you and I've talked about before, is be the leader you never had. And I'm taking that from a very good friend of mine. She uses that language in her speaking engagements, and there's a lot of truth in that. That not only that, but also be the leader you should be, not the leader that you think you should be, or what somebody's pushed you into being. Because if you're not the guy that likes being a super strict accountability person, like, don't find a role that be a salesperson. Somebody that allows you to be creative in what you do, and don't be that person that's standing there at the manufacturing line that says that everything has to fall within this particular spec. There are different personalities for each of that, and then as you grow as a leader, I think some of the lessons learned along the way is I have been bad in my career about mimicking the person that I was working for. Not that there's anything wrong with the people that I worked for, but I was trying to be them, not myself at times. And you need to take components of each one of those. I think as I've matured in my career, start to think back of how about I take this and this and this and this from those leaders and leave these little things behind. And then that allows me to be the leader that I want to be, not the leader that somebody else thinks I should be. That's that lesson early on. I wish that I would have known of having that encouragement of being what was going to be best set for my skill set. I have some things I'm good at and some things I'm not. As a CEO, I have people on my team that are a lot better at some of the things that I need them to be at. It's just it's part of what you have to do when you build a team.
Yeah, we're talking to Jason Blair from Tile Building Centers. We are on your journey. I think you just said you had moved over to True Value. Is that where we're at?
I was about to go to True Value.
Okay, we are about to get to True Value. Spoiler alert to everybody watching and listening at home, on the car, on the road. What led to that decision to leave and go there?
To advance my career. I wanted to do something different, and I think it was a great opportunity for me. It was a great opportunity to work on the other side of the table, so to speak, to move over to a wholesaler, to go work for a company that was the biggest company I still to this day have ever worked for.
Yeah.
It was fun. I really enjoyed that time there. I worked for one of the best leaders, Eric Lane, that I've ever worked for in my career, and I'm still dear friends with him, and learned a lot from his style and his leadership and just the adventure that True Value was at the time. It was some really good times and some really challenging times while I was there. But you put all those arrows in your quiver for sure.
Did you ever get to that point with one of your, somebody that mentored you, where all of a sudden you had that sort of light bulb go off and go, we're more peers and friends and colleagues and associates as opposed to mentor-mentee? Did you ever have that?
For sure, it definitely happens. I think over time as I was able to reconnect with him a couple weeks ago at the Do It Best show, and definitely that next step in life of where you're friends now. And it's still, I still have a tremendous amount of respect. And when you worked for somebody for 6 years of your life, it's hard to not think of them as your leader, I think it's just very natural and speaks highly of him.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we're going to jump ahead a little bit
Yep.
because we may be breaking a record and going to a third episode. We were joking about it, but we're almost there. Talk to me about how you came to Tal. What did that process look like, and then we're going to get into what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I was recruited through a headhunter. They had reached out a few times. You know, they did the classic, like, hey, we got this job. Do you know anybody who'd be a fit? And so I actually had pushed a friend of mine there this way and didn't work out for him. And I described that really quickly. We basically dated and broke up a few times. I had just moved to Oregon, worked for a different company, and that was going great. But I had set a goal in life that I wanted to be a CEO by the time I was 50. And I would not have chased this job, so to speak, if it wasn't the right fit, in addition to being able to achieve something that I'd set a goal in life for myself. So you know what, we worked down a path over a few months, and the everything lined up, and almost 3.5 years later, here I am.
So interesting that you would set a goal for the title, knowing what I know about you, say I want to be a CEO of a company at 50. Why was that the goal? We obviously have to set goals, but why was that one?
I had this strong desire to run all of something, and maybe that's what it was that component, and this provided me that opportunity to be able to do that outside of owning your own company. I think it's as close as you get to it, and it's not that I still don't have a boss and I have a board and all that I report to. But it is this large swath of control, and being able to help guide a company has been really exciting. And I think that's what I want. It is a little unusual for me to say that. It's not been my style to say I want this, and I've not been a title chaser. And there's a whole lessons learned in that component of not chasing titles. But that's how we got here.
So I want to talk about the title chasing, because when we were having our pre-call here, one of the things that you'd mentioned, and you seem pretty passionate about it, and it's always fun when you see passionate people talk about things they're passionate about. And in this case, it was a phone call, so I couldn't actually see you, but I could hear it, and it comes through. You would mention something to the effect, and feel free to correct me if I say this incorrectly, that one of the lessons that you would give somebody, the gift of knowledge and wisdom, experience, all of that, to maybe the next generation or people who want to be a CEO one day, is to not be so impatient and not chase it too early in their career, and to kind of enjoy. I took it as enjoy that process a little bit.
I think it's a struggle, right? A lesson learned for me has been being patient throughout my career as my career has progressed. And the further up you go, the longer you end up waiting at each of those sort of spots along the way. And some of those are going to be enjoyable. Some of them might feel like a bit of a grind, but if you're in the mindset of learning the whole time, you're going to learn something at each step of the journey. So there are probably some steps in my career that I probably should have spent a little more time at. And there's some that maybe I should have pushed through a little more quickly. But again, I had with my boss that became as much a mentor as anything at True Value. I remember him having some very specific conversations with me at a time where there were some other folks around me getting promoted, not in the same part of the organization I worked in, and getting these bigger and better titles. And he could tell that it was bothering me. And we had a great conversation about being patient and about not chasing the title, and this reality that if you're a VP when you're 35 years old, guess what? There's not a lot left, right? You're going to be a VP for a really long time before you move into that next role. And that's my encouragement is make sure you're being compensated fairly for the effort you're putting into it, and don't be so hung up on what the title is, and that the title will play itself out in the right time. And being at the top is exciting, but it's lonely. And it's a lot, and so it's a great journey to get there, but enjoy the journey, as you said.
So, man, so many things I could do with that comment. Let's go with the fun ones here, and then I want to end on a couple of other things here, at least episode 2. But you mentioned journey. We talked a little bit about music. You said you're not good with music. Journey, coming out of Northern California. I'm from Northern California. Yeah. I hear Journey probably far too more than I care to admit, just because of where I live. But you grew up a country western. Yeah,
for the most part.
Right?
I mean, I grew up in a very 70s music listening house that sort of morphed into my college years was the height of like what I call the Garth Brooks era. So I had a cowboy hat and the funny belt and the tight Wranglers, and did my year of 21. I call it. That was the country bar circuit year. You were a comedian. I was going out and dancing at country bars.
So is Garth Brooks like the guy? If you had, somebody said, give me one musician that represents Jason Blair the most, and I know that's going to change.
Era, yeah, probably that era. Maybe George Strait. Like that was the time. And there were so many, one-hit wonder country music bands at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting time.
But you said you're not good with music. Weren't you? Didn't you just go to some concerts?
I just went to the Eagles. Yes, on Friday. It was incredible at the Sphere.
The Sphere in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So you saw the Eagles, and that concert is still going. You just had to leave to come do this. That is Hotel California's playing.
Yeah, it's still playing right now. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Very one of those really interesting experiences in life where the concert was more emotional than I think my wife and I thought it was going to be.
Really?
It was an unexpected. They actually started the concert with Hotel California and then played 4 quintessential songs in a row, and it just brought me back to my childhood and my parents and playing it on 8-track and all that. It was cool. It was
very
a neat
cool.
show.
That's a great night to have out and that experience there. And speaking of night, one of the things that again we talk about, but what keeps you up at night? I didn't want to word it that way, but as part of what you do, you are now, 30 plus locations?
30 locations.
30 locations, 500 employees.
Yep.
You are the CEO. That's a lot of responsibility. We talked a little bit about that is what keeps you up at night, is that responsibility and making sure you're doing right by all those employees? Yeah,
I like to share that responsibility with my team. I think it's important and healthy as a CEO, but that it is myself and my team's job to make sure that we're making the right decisions to support them and in the growth in those communities so that we can continue to be in those communities, that we don't make a catastrophic decision that on their behalf that's going to risk their livelihood. That's what keeps me up at night. That's a real thought that you have to. I think you have this level of responsibility. You need to do that. I don't think you need to carry that burden all on your own. You should share that with your team, but that at the end of the day, we need to be very thoughtful about what we're doing. And that the power that you carry in this role is significant, and you have to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, I mean, 500 direct employees, but the families of those employees.
It's 500 families. Yeah, that's how you have to think about it. There's way more. There's a couple thousand people wrapped up in that decision, plus all the ancillary things that happen in the community. That's what we have to be thoughtful about.
So one of the things that, as we close down this episode, we've talked a lot about the lessons that you've learned through your experiences and being introspective, and we talked about feedback and all that. But I'm curious, like you said, you share that burden with your team, a team that I have to admit you're pretty close, or I would imagine you're pretty close with. What are the lessons you've learned from them? Like, even if they weren't trying to teach you a lesson, if you're sitting in a meeting and somebody mentions something, or they're sharing a story and you're like, I didn't know that, or that's a different way than I would have done it, but that worked. Is there a story or two? Do you learn from them as well?
Yeah, for sure. I believe I take pride in this culture of accountability and this open feedback cycle that we have amongst the team and throughout the organization. And even just recently, we've had to make some tough decisions. Business has been slow. We've had to make some tough decisions, and some of the lessons learned from my team has been that they're here to help make those decisions. It's not mine, and that they're here to take action on those decisions that were made, and helping me understand that what my role as a CEO is, which is not doing those things, is a bit of a lesson learned. I think about the 3.5 years or so I've been a CEO, I've learned a lot, I've changed a lot. And part of it is listening to them and understanding. They desire, they're great leaders.
Yeah.
Let them carry their fair share of the workload, and let them do some of the things that they need to do, and trust them to make those decisions. I've learned that a bit of what you alluded to is I don't have to always agree with what their decisions are. I just need to support them 100%. I tell my team all the time, make a decision and believe in it wholeheartedly until you're proven that it's not the right decision anymore, and then change directions. Right. But if we don't wholly believe in what we're doing, then it's going to come across as disgenuine when we're presenting it to our employees. So yeah, there's lessons learned all the time from my group. I couldn't do what I do without having a great team that supports me, for sure.
He is the Garth Brooks of the building industry. He is the CEO of Tile Building Centers. He is Jason Blair. Jason, thank you very much for being a guest in your own home.
You bet.
Here on Strong Conversations.
Yeah, thanks.
No, thank you. And thank you all. Stay tuned. We got more episodes coming from Strong Conversations soon. See you next time.